Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Opp Watch. This weekend, CF Montreal hit the road once again for their fourth away match of the season, traveling to take on FC Cincinnati at TQL Stadium. It's a matchup between two sides searching for a much-needed response after recent setbacks, setting the stage for a high-stakes Sunday afternoon clash. To break it all down, we're joined by Kenta Hagiwara, host of the Asian Futbol Show and contributor to Area Sportsnet, who's going to bring us some valuable insights from the FC Cincinnati perspective ahead of this, I want to say, intriguing showdown. We're only in the, I think I messed it up. I think we're in the fifth game now. I might be wrong in that, but yeah, it's already an intriguing showdown. We're not even mid-season, but it's already, I think, for both teams, a very, very important game. Kenta, how you doing today?
Doing very well. Thanks for asking, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, we're excited. We do this as our listeners know. We do this every week. We like to talk from from other podcasters, other media members that like to that cover their team, so we can get a little bit of a scoop, a little bit of insight as to what's going on around the league. Let's get started. So, if you had to sum up FC Cincinnati's 2025 season in one sentence, how would you describe it?
Ooh, that's a good question. In one sentence, think it was a season of almost. You look at, and I'll explain my reasoning there. Mid-season, they were trying to bring in a DP9, or DP9 2024. They weren't able to. They brought in the DPs that they wanted to. They Lucho moved on. Lucho Acosta moved on. They brought in Evander. They were able to bring on Kevin Denke, and it just didn't exactly click between the two of them. I think the chemistry wasn't exactly there. There were some preseason issues, and it was just trying to figure out the best system to bring the best out of those two players. Didn't really exactly work. They eventually brought on Brenner in the second half of the year, and it started to click with him kind of playing facilitator between the two of them. But ultimately, you come 1 point short of the supporter shield at the end of the day. That's a tough pill to swallow. I get that the supporter shield was finished before the last match. Like it wasn't as close as it seems like. Philadelphia didn't play their best football down the stretch over the last couple of matches, but at the end of the day, it's one point. That's a brutal way to do that. And then you beat Columbus across 3 matches in the first round, then you lose bad to Miami at home. So you look at it and it's like, if only a couple of those matches would have gone a different way, you'd be looking at silverware in Cincinnati. But obviously that's not to be, and you're looking at another season under Pat Noonan with just one supporter shield back in 2023. So I think there's some tension there from the fan base to a degree.
We'll get right to it about Pat Noonan in a bit, but I do want to know, were there any maybe key moments or maybe turning points during the season that maybe defined the 2025 campaign for you guys?
Ooh. I'm sure there's a lot that the fans are gonna be like, "Oh, that match was really crucial."
Maybe something outside the field that impacted the product and the game during the season.
I mean, there are some off the field issues, but like here and there, but that's always bound to happen in the sport. I would even look at the match right before Leagues Cup against Miami, a Miami team that didn't have Messi. I don't think they had Jordi Alba in that match either. So it was a match that you should have won, and it was just a 0-0 draw. Like Miami rarely created any chances in Miami, and it's some of those points where it's like, I'm sure not only those points would have been crucial for the supporter shield, but that would have been the result you could have looked back at ahead of the match in the playoffs, and maybe you treat that match slightly differently, and that result goes differently. But look, I think from around August-ish, they had some results. They weren't as consistent in the results down the stretch. They had a stretch where like they lost 3 of 4 and had 2 red cards in 4 matches, and you look at that stretch and it's just 3-1 no losses, and that's the defining moment, right? Where you're like, it's so close and you're just unable to get over that hump.
Oh my God, no, we've seen that way too much in Montreal. These little moments where it feels like it's longer than it actually is. Okay, so let's talk about the new season, right? Because we're on our way. How would you assess FC Cincinnati's offseason from, say, roster move, maybe some tactical adjustments to preseason preparation? Like, how confident are you or the fan base feeling about some of these decisions that set up this team for this season?
Well, they didn't make a ton of moves. They brought in Tom Barlow. They brought in Christian Fletcher, who's been hurt. He's coming back from an ACL injury. They brought in some other players. I guess the big one being they brought in Brian Ramirez as their new left wing back in that back five system. But as a whole, there's been a lot of continuity in the roster, which I guess on one side of the coin, you look at that and say that's a rarity in MLS, and that's a good thing to retain a lot of the players that brought you success in the previous season, and to have a core that's consistent from season to season, because that's not necessarily a common thing in this league. And on the other hand, you would go, well, you needed to bring in more talent and like overhaul certain parts, and the pieces that you did lose, whether it was like Yuya Kubo and the versatility he brought, you didn't exactly replace. And so I think it's two sides of the same coin, depending on how you want to look at it. But I'm sure if early on in the season, with how the results have been going in MLS play, you would probably look at the latter and say, well, maybe they didn't do enough in the offseason.
Yeah, well, look, I was actually watching an FC Cincinnati game. I think this was a week ago. I want to say last weekend or the weekend before that. And the play-by-play commentator was saying, they're not really sure where to turn besides Evander. And Evander did get hurt, I believe, in the second game of the season. But they don't really know where to turn to, like, if they want to, score goals or desperately needs to score goals because they're behind or whatnot. Was that something that you think they knew was going to happen, were prepared for in the offseason for these kind of crucial moments like we're seeing now?
I mean, you even look at last year with Evander. He was let me pull out the statistic that I was looking up after the loss to Toronto. I think it was he'd scored 18 goals in MLS play last season. 10 of them went from outside the box, and out of those 10 matches that he scored a goal from outside the box, 6 of them they won by a single goal. So that shot from outside the 18 was the reason they got 3 points. It's difficult to kind of rely on a single player, but that's been how Cincinnati have found success. I mean, you had an MVP winner in 2023 in Lucho Acosta at the 10, and that's the season they won the Supporters' Shield. And then you move on from Acosta to another MVP finalist in Evander. So there's always been a 10 that can create chances and make stuff happen out of virtually nothing. But again, being overly reliant on that doesn't necessarily consistently lead to success in this league, and you're seeing it, right? He, again, as you said, Evander got hurt in the first match of the MLS regular season. It was the second match that they played after a CONCACAF Champions Cup match against O&M FC. You see Evander go down, and I think it was 10th minute-ish in the first match.
No contact.
And a non-contact injury. He holds his hamstring, and you're like, oh my. And the next 2 matches, I mean, Cincinnati had a good 10-minute stretch in the latter half of that match where they scored 2 goals late, and they were able to get a 2-0 win against Atlanta. But then you look at the matches against Minnesota, and you look at the match against Toronto, where they really just didn't have anything going in terms of off the ball movement, just creative identity in the attacking third. And it feels like there's just a lack of new ideas, and the old ideas that used to work, it's been the same DNA for so long that I think teams are able to easily pick it up. And you saw Toronto, Minnesota sit back in their back 5 and kind of play in the low block and absorb a lot of the pressure. Cincinnati weren't able to create chances. And if you're Toronto, you're able to hit on the counter and score a goal late. And Minnesota were able to kind of score a weird goal off a set piece, which they do pretty frequently. So Pat Noonan seemed to say that it wasn't necessarily one issue. He didn't give too much credit to there's a lack of off the ball movement criticism that a lot of people on Twitter and a lot of people on social media were putting at FC Cincinnati, and they backed it up with that big win against Tigres. But then this weekend happened, and you lose 6-1 in New England. So I think now there's equally many
Yeah,
questions going around on the other side of the ball defensively.
exactly. And I kind of wanted to talk about that because, as you mentioned, FC Cincinnati has been playing and winning at the CONCACAF Champions Cup, but their start at the MLS hasn't been the best. It's such an unbalanced streak of results between the two competitions. How would you say their 2026 has gone so far? How are they? How are we
Uh,
feeling about that?
I don't know. I mean, it's easy to bunch the O&M to kind of disregard the O&M-FC matches, and then that's not to discredit them as a club, but clearly the matches weren't as competitive. I mean, you saw the 9-0 win at home in the second leg of that competition, then that kind of speaks to the level of competition we were having. So
Yeah.
I think it kind of feels like the 3-0 win was more of an outlier than anything else. But at the same time, you look at the Toronto matches and Minnesota matches, as badly as they played, they were ultimately 1-0 losses. And, you know, a one moment of brilliance there with Evander. If Evander could have played more minutes or played at all, that changes the complexion of a match there. And the 6-1 was they rotated 7 of 11 starters, and all 7 were outfield players from their win against Tigres. So I think part of it is kind of prioritizing what matches are more important for FC Cincinnati right now, and I think it's pretty clear right now they're trying to focus all their attention against in CONCACAF Champions Cup, in particular against Tigres, who they were knocked out against last season. It was really frustrating to not get a result at home. It was a 1-1 draw, and then you go on the road and get Cincinnati played, I thought, really well in that match in Montréal last year, and within 10 minutes they gave up 3 goals and lost 3-1 and 4-2 in aggregate. So I think they're trying to give themselves that buffer, which they were able to do with 3-0 win now, where you go into the match. I mean, at the time of recording, I guess this is tomorrow, where you're sitting with a 3-0 win at home. So we'll see what that aggregate, that reverse fixture looks like. But it's clear they're trying to prioritize that competition as much as possible, and I can't say I blame FC Cincinnati for that either. Just knowing the amount of prize money that's on the table there, and just the entry into Club World Cup and everything that goes with winning a CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah, honestly, if CF Montreal was in the position that FC Cincinnati is in now, 100% I would expect them to prioritize that game over FC Cincinnati on a Sunday, right? Because it's just like you mentioned, there's so many more in the long run. There's so many more rewards, right? So I guess in a sense, CF Montreal should consider themselves lucky that they might be getting overlooked. But I want to know, because you mentioned a little bit earlier about Pat Noonan. What is the overall mood among supporters regarding Pat Noonan on in his, I believe it's his 5th season with the team, and at the helmet? Has the perception shifted at all since the start of this season?
I don't know if it's shifted a ton, but it hasn't gotten better. That's for sure. I certainly don't think it's a situation like what we saw in Orlando with Oscar Pereira, where it the split is bound to happen. I still think Pat Noonan has quite a long leash, especially with how that Tigres match went on. And as long as they're in CCC, like I don't see him. I don't see that being a situation. But I think, especially considering how Sunday's net match went, I think it's there's a lot of people in the fan base who have been very reactionary based off of that result, which is understandable. You play against Toronto at home 2 weeks ago, really poorly against a Toronto side that on paper you should have won against, considering how they played last year, and they didn't. They still didn't have Josh Sargent, so aside from George Mihailovic, it's like what other notable name is there? And you didn't play well against them. You played well against Tigres, but then you flip the script and you play your worst game in 4 years under Pat Noonan. In New England. So I think there's a lot of fans in Cincinnati right now who are probably frustrated with how Pat Noonan's playing, but at the end of the day, it's like you saw back when Seattle won CONCACAF Champions Cup, like they really struggled in league play. And currently with how the MLS MLS Cup playoffs, how that format is set up, as long as you're not a bottom 6 team in the East, you're in the playoffs. right? I
Yeah.
mean, 9 of each, so 60%
And even
of
then,
teams make
CF
it.
Montreal can't make it to the playoffs. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
But I mean, it just
yeah,
goes to show, like,
yeah,
you have enough time to be able to make up that ground in the latter half of the latter stages of the season. So, um, we'll see what the perception looks like with Noonan maybe around the World Cup, where it's halfway
yeah.
through the season, and we get a better picture on what MLS regular season looks
Yeah,
like
maybe the
halfway.
sample size is a little too small right now, but maybe in a few weeks we get a bit clearer picture as to where the season is going. Okay, so let's talk about the game. Tactically speaking, what kind of game should CF Montreal prepare for when they face FC Cincinnati on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, Cincinnati like to play in a three-back system. It's some variation of a 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. It's the last two matches Cincinnati have played against a 4-2-3-1, so they played in kind of a midfield three with a ball winning six and then 2 8s on each side, kind of playing box to box in their midfield. And the six kind of man marked the opposition 10. But when they played the back five opponents, Toronto played Cincinnati in a back five. Minnesota always played in a back five. When they played those teams, they played more in their 3-4-1-2 with a 10 sitting under 2 9s with just a double pivot in the midfield. So we'll see what that shape in the midfield looks like, because that's kind of the one area of, I think, Noonan's system that over the season so far has been really, really inconsistent as to what he wants to do in the midfield, and I think at times really adapts based off of what the opposition is doing. But aside from that, it's a back three with anchored by Miles Robinson, who's one of the best center backs in the league, in my opinion.
Oh
You
yeah.
have these wing backs who are very aggressive in getting forward, so they play practically as wingers, especially on the right side with Ender Echenike, very pacey right wing back. I would say Ramirez on the left side, assuming those two are the starters, is a bit more of a traditional fullback where he has more defensive qualities than attacking qualities. And then you have your box-to-box midfielders that can crash the box. Xander at the 10, assuming he's healthy enough to start, who just kind of roams around in the field. And then you have Kevin Denke, who's recently dropping more into the midfield as a kind of almost a center forward compared to Tom Barlow, who's playing kind of as a traditional 9. So I'm sure those players would have. I don't know who's going to start. Ultimately, it kind of depends on how the Tigres match goes and who comes out healthy and who comes out with a knock and what the minutes there look like. But it'll be some variation of a 3-5-2 or 3-4-1-2.
Okay. Well, we're excited. Is there any, maybe because you talked a lot about Evander and some of these players that everybody knows about, but are there well, actually, I'm sorry, before I get into that, what are maybe some specific areas of Cincinnati's games that could probably cause problems for CF Montreal this weekend?
I think if Cincinnati's going to, based off of how they played so far, if they're going to create anything, it's going to be down the right with Echenike. He's just so fast. He's probably one of the fastest players I've ever seen play. And he's pacey. He's good on the ball. And his delivery into the box has gotten significantly better since when he joined last summer. So a lot that goes well for FC Cincinnati in the attacking phases of play, primarily in those transitional moments where the defense maybe on the opposition isn't perfectly lined up, and that's where quick 1-2s down the right side and you get Echenike running, and then now all of a sudden you have 2 9s streaking in the box, right? And he has targets. So that's where Cincinnati is going to be able to create a lot of chances. We'll see what Evander looks like. At his best, he can do everything. He can thread passes. He can shoot from outside the box, and he becomes a really dangerous player. But that truly depends on what he looks like in terms of fitness and health, because I don't think he's looked his best so far. So.
Ugh. And now this is the fun part for CF Montreal fans. So, what are maybe some vulnerabilities in Cincinnati's game that CF Montreal could look to exploit?
Yeah, I mean, you just look at what other teams have done really well, right? I think usually FC Cincinnati are really good in one-on-one defending. You look at Nick Hagland from on the right, Teenage Hadebe, and obviously Miles Robinson. I think they're great one-on-one defenders, but in isolation, especially if the top center backs aren't playing because they played 90 minutes in Monterrey 3 days prior to the match, if there's rotation, I mean, we saw a 17-year-old start in New England and it didn't go well. I mean, he didn't play well. So I think that's certainly a factor. And I talked about how great Echenike is on the right. The one, kind of the issue there is when he's playing so aggressively down the right in transitional moments, he doesn't get back defensively.
I have seen that too. Yeah, that happens in
Yeah.
Montreal
So
too.
now all of a
Yeah,
sudden you have a massive advantage going down the left flank in terms of what you can do there. Your right center back in the back three stretched out wide, and so you can start to create stuff, especially if the holding midfielders, whether it's just 1-6 and 2-8s or two 6s and a 10, whatever that trio looks like in the midfield, if they aren't getting back defensively to kind of support in those areas, you can really see some stuff start to open up. And one poor challenge by a center back on the right side can easily lead to goals. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing. Also, Cincinnati haven't broken down a low block at all. Like, they just struggle. So maybe there is something to be said about just, hey, you can have the ball. We're just going to sit back and defend, and you're not going to be able to create chances. And when the time comes, we're going to hit you on the counter. Because it feels like that recipe has found success, especially with how Toronto played. And Toronto defended really well in Cincinnati. And then they found their moment late in the match to hit on the counter and caught Cincinnati's center back sleeping a bit. And you come away with all 3 points in Cincinnati. So I think there's definitely a recipe there, especially if you have center backs that aren't playing normally or aren't the first choice center backs playing, and the communication isn't the best, maybe because you have different combinations in the back line.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does sound like they are not young players, but they are maybe not used to playing together, which could also impact how they defend. Now I'm going to go back to my question that I asked like 5 minutes ago. So I apologize for that. Now, is there a dark horse or maybe an underrated player who could swing this match for FC Cincinnati?
Ooh, a dark horse player that could swing the match. That's a good question.
Somebody that goes unnoticed. Somebody that does the dirty work that no other player wants to do.
I really like the Moroccan striker Ayoub Jabari. He's a young striker that they signed on loan last year for a half season and signed on a permanent transfer from France, from League Two. I forget what side it was. He's very pacey. He's a tall guy. And he doesn't necessarily I think he right now totem pole wise is below Tom Barlow and obviously below Kevin Denke, so he maybe doesn't get the regular minutes that you would expect. But especially again, you have a midweek match, you're playing a lot of matches and in succession. Granted, after the Montreal match, it's an international break, so there's a bit of a break, so maybe he gets less minutes just purely off of that. But I think what he brings to the table is a different skill set, especially in terms of his hold up play and what he can do there. So maybe he's not the one to put the ball in the back of the net, but I think he can really cause some issues for a lot of back lines in MLS in general. And he's got the pace, he's got the physicality, and I like what I see from him. So if I had to pick an underrated pick in terms of who can kind of wreck a game in the attacking phase of play, I would pick Jabari, whether that's a 15-minute cameo off the bench or if that's as a starter.
Interesting. And what are your predictions for Sunday?
Ooh, I don't know. I went into the New England match.
I can't even do it.
Right? I went into the New England match and I was like, this is probably going to be a 1-1 draw. And then, 20 minutes in, I was like, okay. It was Cincinnati was up 1-0, and I was like, okay, I might be onto something. And then the 6 unanswered goals happened. And I'm like, I was way off on that one.
Okay. So, I mean, if you can't predict, you can't predict.
If I'm throwing you're predicting a draw. I think I am predicting a draw too. I'd imagine even if the starters, the typical starters don't start, it'll be a similar situation to New England, especially because again, it's right before an international break where like you'll get the key players in the second half and they can in front of a home crowd, hopefully produce something, even if they're down at the break. So I don't think Pat Noonan wants to lose. What would this be? 4 consecutive MLS matches and only have 3 points in 5 matches to start the year. I think there's a bit more pressure to win this one just because with how the previous matches. But I said that for the New England match, and
it's a
that
young
didn't go over
season,
well.
man. It's a young season for all MLS sides. I think even in Montreal, a lot of us are already pressing the panic button because we've only won one game. But at the end of the day, it is a very young season. And Kenta, you know this. The season can flip around so fast with 3-4 wins in a row, right? So it's going to be an interesting season. I almost want to say it's going to be a long one, but I don't think it's. I'm thankful after having 3 months off of soccer that we have so much soccer now. Um, CF Montreal has some really, really good traveling fans, and they're probably going to be traveling to FC Cincinnati to watch a game. Where's your go-to spot to eat, and
Ooh,
what is the must-try dish while there?
I'm sure a lot of people know about Cincinnati chili, or also known as Skyline chili. Skyline is kind of the famous, if you want to call it that, local chain that serves Cincinnati chili.
All right.
But yeah, chili.
What's your spot though, Kenta? We want to go where you're
Ooh.
going.
If I'm eating food before a match, because usually if I'm in like the box, they have food, and I don't go buy food and then
We're not gonna
into
go to the
stadium and
box,
also eat,
Kenta.
right? But because people aren't doing this, right, and
Yeah.
they're at in Over the Rhine, there's a ton of great restaurants in the Over the Rhine, which is like a 10-minute walk just east of the stadium in Cincinnati, and in the West End. There's a great pizza place called Taglio. They're awesome. I always go with my friends every Sunday night. Probably not this week because we have a Sunday match, so we'll probably push that to Saturday. But that's always been a place that I really enjoy going to. They have a New York style, like the thin crust pizza, but they also have the deep dish Detroit style pizza, which is just phenomenal. And they have some great signature pizzas there. You also have, if you're like into just like good bar food, or fried chicken, the Eagle in Over the Rhine is great. It's just not as time consuming in my eyes, and great fried chicken. They give you a big thing of hot honey to kind of pour on it, and you enjoy it, and you can sit at the bar, have a blast there.
Stop. You're getting me hungry. This is too much.
No, Over the Rhine is great. It's great. Yeah, I mean,
literally
I don't think
Uber
you really
ordering
can go
right
wrong.
now. But,
Right. It's about that time, honestly.
Jesus, I'm so hungry. But all right, Kenta. Hey, listen, we really, really appreciate taking some time to join the Ball is Round Montreal for this edition of Opp Watch. But before we let you go, where can our listeners follow you to stay up to date all things FC Cincinnati and MLS?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, or whatever that title is, right? It's Kenta Hagiwara, or just look up Kenta Hagiwara, and you'll find me there. Or you can just follow Area Sport Net. I also have a podcast called the Asian Futbol Show. We're an AFC accredited podcast that covers Asian football club and national teams. We have a blast over there with my two co-hosts. Would love for you guys to check that out as well. But yeah, just look up my name. I'll come up I'm on most social media. So
awesome. Well, as we always say on this show on Opp Watch, may the best team win.